What's going on, everybody, and welcome back into the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. With you here on Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. We are looking at Week 6 waiver opportunities as this is waiver day. Waivers will run overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. For some people, it's later on Wednesday afternoon. So trying to get you set for the claims that you should be considering this week in fantasy football. We're going to start at the running back position. We'll go to the wide receiver position, tight ends, take a look at quarterbacks as well. Try to give any insight and tidbits that we think would be valuable for this week. Make sure to subscribe to this channel. If you enjoy fantasy football content throughout the season, we're here to get you set with your waivers, get you set with trades in particular. Wednesdays and Thursdays will be trade videos talking about the most traded players on Yahoo platforms because they do a nice job of putting it on the screen so that we can see what's actually going on, where we dive into trade opportunities that you might have in your league. So let's go ahead, though, and start here with the waiver possibilities for this week. I am sorting this on Yahoo by all players, not just available players in the league that I'm in, but all players to see who's being added the most to give you a sense for who might be available on some waiver wires. As you can see on the screen here, a lot of these names already rostered in my league, but I do play in a deeper league that's showing here on Yahoo. So we'll try to talk about the players that could be available, the ones that may be worth at least keeping an eye on, even though they may be rostered in a number of leagues, and talk a little bit about FAAB dollars that we would consider spending, which is always a complicated thing because it's week 6. You might have already spent half your FAAB, maybe you already spent most of your FAAB, but just talking about how aggressive I would want to be getting some of these players on my teams, depending on what I needed, right? That's also relevant to the question. So let's go ahead and jump in with Emari Demercado, who is a running back for the Arizona Cardinals. He's the most added player at the running back position as of now on Yahoo, which is really interesting, right? That over 10,000 people have been able to add this player, even though waivers haven't run, right? So it's not going to be a perfect example, but because the leagues that are letting you get this guy are, for whatever reason, not set up to do waivers. So that's weird. But Demercado, I think, is interesting because the news this morning that James Conner has an injury. Looks like it could potentially be IR for him as of this recording due to the knee. So Demercado ended up being a guy that got some good run in this game. 10 rushing attempts for 45 yards and a touchdown, mixed in a little bit in the passing game. The Cardinals aren't a very exciting offense, but anytime you've got a running back that's getting reasonable volume, 10-plus carries in a game is definitely solid volume. Whether he's a good player or not, it's worth taking a stab on a guy like that. So if you are needy at the running back position, I think Demercado is going to be one of the most popular ads this week. I would point out another name, Jeff Wilson Jr., who is currently on injured reserve for the Miami Dolphins. But the news today that Devon Achane, their exciting rookie running back, is injured now and is going to miss a few weeks. I haven't seen anything on his potential for IR. That would mean 4 weeks minimum. But Jeff Wilson potentially coming off of IR, according to the reports that he's having his practice window, his 21-day window to be activated to the active roster, kicks off this week. So Jeff Wilson, to me, very interesting in the short term because we know that Miami offense is explosive and it's based on speed, and Jeff Wilson fits really nicely with that team. I don't think you would have seen Devon Achane emerge the way that he did. He wouldn't have had the opportunity if Jeff Wilson had been healthy these first few weeks. So he's definitely a guy that I think is interesting. It seems like both short-term injuries, though. In Connor's case, if he needs IR, that's 4 or 5 weeks in that range for how long he could miss. Devon Achane, hopefully it's going to be less than that. I haven't seen anything yet officially on him for IR, but you have to assume it'll be a few weeks. I'd rather have Jeff Wilson, being totally honest, than Demercado, just based on the idea that I think the Miami Dolphins is going to be a much better offense. But Demercado, again, if you're running back needy, you need somebody that you can plug into your lineup and hope and pray he can get you 10 to 12 points. Like that, it's a running back that's going to get volume. So if you're needy at the position, absolutely you go in on either of these guys. Tyjae Spears is the next most rostered, or I should say next most added running back this week, because as something we've been talking about a little bit on this channel, he has been dipping into the Derrick Henry snap share for a while now. And this week it finally resulted in him having a good fantasy day, finding the end zone, very involved in the passing game, had a season-high targets, 4 for 5 and 35 yards, which is a great boost to your fantasy lineup, in addition to whatever he can do on the ground. So, Derrick Henry, we've talked a lot about him and whether he's somebody that you're fading the rest of the season, or should you trade for him off the bad game he had a couple of weeks ago? We'll be doing some more of that kind of conversation tomorrow in terms of trade targets on the channel, so make sure you subscribe. But Tyjae Spears, like if you look at snap counts, they showed on Sleeper, not Yahoo, but he's been involved in terms of just seeing the field. I don't know how explosive, dynamic, the volume is going to be in terms of the Titans' offense in general. They don't score a ton of points on a week-to-week basis, but yeah, if Tyjae Spears is out there in your league, he probably shouldn't be, just because he's a guy that's been seeing the field anyway, and someone that they really liked coming out of the draft. He was going to be, Derrick Henry's backup, but I think you're starting to see with Henry aging, he's like 29 years old now. Tyjae Spears going to continue to mix in a little bit. Solid running back. I believe he was out of Tulane, if I'm not mistaken. Roschon Johnson is a guy who's almost definitely rostered in your league, but I want to mention him really quickly. The next most added name. He left the game on Thursday night with a concussion, I believe was the case. Yeah, Thursday against the Commanders. Didn't do much. That was a good game for Khalil Herbert, but then he got hurt. And I believe the word on Khalil Herbert is that he's going to be out for a little while. So in the case of Roschon Johnson, you see right next up is D'Onta Foreman as people try to figure out which Chicago running back to go after. Roschon Johnson is the one that I want. Concussed, and that may make it a little bit easier for you because people are going to see the Q by his name and maybe not dig into the injury. We know that concussions at this point, sucks that they're a reality in football, but Roschon Johnson's probably going to be back this week, if not by the next week, after, working through the concussion, assuming it's on like a normal trajectory and timeline for what we tend to see. He's going to probably be the lead back. You'll see D'Onta Foreman mix in. He doesn't have the skill set that really excites me, so I'm not interested in adding him this week. A 1 week start, maybe Roschon Johnson does happen to miss one more week with a concussion. D'Onta Foreman would be a great guy to fire up, I guess, just because of the volume argument, same as we made for Demercado. But I'm not really interested in the skill set of Foreman, so safely probably going to ignore him this week when it comes to waivers. And after that, I'm just going to go ahead and sort this by all available in my league so we get a better idea for some of the names that could be out there. Antonio Gibson getting added. It's kind of bleak out there, but he had some fantasy points, and it was all through the air. If they want to use him like a receiving weapon in PPR leagues, I could see the desperate bye week folks saying, all right, Antonio Gibson, I could do worse. I've got him on one of my benches. It's not, he's not a guy that I'm eager to fire up, but maybe on the hope that passing volume could continue. I'm just not entirely sure that it will. And he did end up on waivers in this league of mine, even though he's rostered in about half of Yahoo leagues. Then you've got kind of the Kendre Miller, you saw Alvin Kamara come back and pretty much dominate the workload the last couple of weeks. Although in the blowout, Kendre Miller did get some run and did something with it too. I like the 4 for 53 through the air, but you also should be a little bit cautious about that just because this game was a major blowout. They beat the Patriots 34-0, the Saints did. And so how involved is Kendre Miller really going to be? There's not a ton to me in terms of like going down the line. After the names that we kind of went through, it really does get to be kind of handcuff territory. Tyler Algier is out here in this league. Savon Ahmed, maybe he gets some run for Miami with the injury to A-Chain. You can go down the list. Keontae Ingram, let's see, he hasn't even mixed in, wasn't active this week. So maybe Keontae Ingram is somebody that we caution a little bit when it comes to Demercado if they decide to split some work with Ingram. But like I said, Ingram was inactive. He does have a questionable tag. I wonder if there was an injury there. It doesn't seem like it's really injury related. Okay, so it says neck. So maybe he is hurt, but Demercado probably the guy in the Arizona backfield that you want. After that, there's really just not a lot to get to. Tank Bigsby if you want to handcuff ETN, Rico Dowdle if you want to handcuff Pollard. Going on down the line, there's just really not a lot to see here. Darrington Evans now signed to the active roster, it looked like, due to the injury to Herbert. So that kind of tells you wheels up, I think, for Roschon Johnson. If Roschon Johnson's out there in your league, just looking at these names, he would be my number one running back acquisition, I think. Either him or Jeff Wilson. The Jeff Wilson thing, he could end up coming back and having a real role, but I think with what they've seen from A-Chain, that A-Chain's role is going to be safe when he returns from injury, assuming that's within a few weeks. Whereas Roschon Johnson, I think, takes over that backfield in the long term anyway. So with the injury to Khalil Herbert, I'm excited to add Roschon Johnson if there's a chance I can do it this week, because I think it times up really well. He has the concussion, so that maybe allows you to get him where otherwise people would have been hyping him up due to Herbert's injury. So we'll kind of see what that looks like. For me, I'm going Roschon Johnson, call my shot. Number 2, Jeff Wilson, and Demercado, I think number 3 to me. Although for a floor play, Demercado, he's definitely somebody that you need to be adding if you need somebody to start at the running back position. If you're looking for upside season long, Roschon Johnson would be a little higher than that for me. He is less than 50% rostered in Yahoo, so there's a chance you could get him. And then Jeff Wilson, only 27% rostered. Hopefully you've been stashing him on IR. That's something I probably should have done a video about to kind of let you guys know the different stashes to maybe keep an eye on if you have IR spots in your league. But that's kind of where I am on the running backs. Looking at Justice Hill real quick, wanting to see. He's not anybody that's really going to excite me. And Keaton Mitchell is another name. I wonder if I'm able to do searches here on this platform. I'm trying to find what's up with Keaton Mitchell. Switching tabs here. Yeah, Keaton Mitchell is another guy that I wanted to bring up because he may be out there available for you. Rostered in 26% of leagues. Was a running back that hurt his shoulder in the preseason but looked good in the preseason for Baltimore. And I'm just not enthused by Gus Edwards or Justice Hill, any of these other guys. I don't think they're very good. And so maybe if Keaton Mitchell ever gets run and gets to do something with it, he was designated to return to practice, but was not activated for week 5. So there's a chance you might be able to slide in right before he comes back and pick him up. And as long as he stays on IR, you can immediately IR him and pick up somebody else to get you through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But just remember that by the weekend, Mitchell will probably be activated. But that's something that I like to do. Strategically, if there's a guy that's on IR, but he's going to come back soon, you could pick him up on waiver day, put him on IR, and then pick up another player for free and, pick up the backup running back for Thursday Night Football. And if somebody in that game gets injured, suddenly you go, oh, this is an asset that I can actually keep or trade, or maybe I decide to trade Keaton Mitchell because now everybody is on to him being interesting for Sunday. Like, it's just roster strategies that can only benefit you. It's got no downside in terms of doing some of those kinds of things. So that's what we're looking at the running back position. Roschon Johnson, if he's out there. Jeff Wilson Jr., if he's out there. Demercado would be the guy probably, though, if you're saying, hey, I just need somebody to plug in and start at RB2 this week because of buys or whatever the case might be. Okay, Demercado, you could probably do worse than that, assuming he's going to remain in a prominent role there for the Cardinals. Wide receiver, there have not been very many ads so far. Brenden Powell looks to be on top of the list on the Yahoo platform, and that's because of the Justin Jefferson news that came out this morning that he is going to be on IR. And we'll talk on Wednesday about whether he's a trade-for candidate given the status of his injury. The Vikings could very quickly go in the wrong direction. There's no indication yet that, Justin Jefferson is going to hold out. He doesn't want to return to play. But, if they trade Kirk Cousins, I'm just saying it can really go down quickly. So be aware if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to trade for Justin Jefferson. Normally, that's exactly the kind of move that we're looking to make. If you started 4-1 or 5-0, even 3-2, but with a deep bench, and you say, hey, I could make a trade for Justin Jefferson and get by for 4 or 5 or 6 weeks and then have him for the fantasy playoffs, normally that'd be fantastic. It could get dicey in Minneapolis because Minnesota is struggling. And honestly, Kirk Cousins, a pending free agent, I want to see Kirk Cousins get a chance to play in the playoffs and maybe go to a Super Bowl or something. So I'm kind of hoping he does get traded because it ain't happening there in Minnesota. But nevertheless, Brenden Powell is a wide receiver that figures to potentially get some more looks. That's who they were going to at times late in the game when they were trying to come back against the Chiefs. You can see there on your screen, he went 4 for 43 with 6 targets. Also had a 9-yard rushing attempt. Maybe for deep leagues, he's not really over any of the running backs that we mentioned, though, in terms of priority for waivers. And then it looks to be pretty bleak in terms of behind him. There's just not a lot. Nothing really going down this week. Michael Wilson was a guy that had 2 great weeks in a row, and if you took a stab on him, it didn't go well. This is just in my waiver wire, though. Let me go across the sphere and see if there's anybody else that's out there. Okay, so KJ Osborn. Yeah. This is going to look a lot better because if you're in some shallow leagues, there might be some guys that are available, and they're just not on waivers in my league. KJ Osborn would be the Minnesota wide receiver that stands to gain the most from the Justin Jefferson injury. had 9 targets in the game. He's going to be in that similar role in the lineup. So I would say he's definitely got to be at the top of the list or near the top of the list if he's available in your league. He's only rostered in 11% of leagues. So if I'm needy at wide receiver to start somebody, I would consider, dropping some FAAB on KJ Osborn. I always hesitate. You hear the fantasy podcast where they say drop, 50% of your FAAB or whatever. And it's really impossible to say anymore because you might not have the same number of FAAB that you started with. So it's always going to be discretionary. And let me know in the comments if you're like, hey, here's my FAAB situation. I want to cater my advice to your situation. So, hey, I need a wide receiver too, and this is how much FAAB I have. Do you think it's worth it to drop the load on KJ Osborn? We can talk about that in the comments on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe too if you enjoy this kind of fantasy content. But I would say Osborn is solid. Like he'll probably mix in and get a lot of targets. I just don't know if the passing offense in Minnesota is going to be as effective without Jefferson as part of the mix. And so I'm not going to, we know KJ Osborn. We've seen him. He's a fine player, but he's not been a difference maker over the course of his career. And so I'd be nervous about dropping, half my budget just to get a guy who I don't really think is necessarily high upside, but he is going to get targets. So opportunity is there. I think Cousins is a good quarterback for as long as he is there. And that you've got at least 4 weeks of Jefferson being out. So if you're desperate, yeah, I could see going KJ Osborn. But in terms of just the value to my team, I think I'd rather have Jeff Wilson at running back. I'd rather have Roschon Johnson at running back, unless I was needy at wide receiver. All those running backs, even Demercado, would be a priority above Osborn for me if it's all equal and you're just looking to add somebody to your bench. Josh Downs is somebody that I think it's time to start paying attention to. 6 targets, caught them all for 97 yards. Talented wide receiver, fell in the NFL draft out of North Carolina, and I was surprised to see him go as late as he did. And he was one of those that if you saw his video of him getting informed that he was drafted, man, he was emotional. He said, "You're not going to regret this. I'm going to make this worth your while," to the Indianapolis Colts. Kind of guy that you really just want to root for. Maybe that doesn't matter to you in fantasy, but I always enjoy kind of following stories for good guys that get an opportunity and make the most of it. Has had some, good games with targets. Going to be interesting to see, though. Now Anthony Richardson is out. I honestly think that maybe helps Josh Downs just in terms of Gardner Minshew. He's going to lock onto the targets that he favors and seem to go in there with Josh Downs in this game for the 6 targets. I want to see. So just 2 of the 6 were for Josh Downs, 2 of the 6 catches that he had. But I think definitely they're going to have a connection that you can probably count on. To me, I like the younger players who have maybe not shown their ceiling. And so if I don't need a starter right now, Josh Downs is my preferred option over KJ Osborn, just because I think long-term he could continue to emerge. And then we go, oh, he's an NFL playmaker, right? Like rookies do that all the time where they emerge as the season goes along. So for me, I think we know the talent of Osborn. We know that we know the opportunity is going to be there for Osborn, but Downs is a guy that he may have more talent and have more to show, and there's not going to be any doubt to the opportunity either. The Colts, whether it's Minshew or Anthony Richardson, I think are going to be able to sustain a decent amount of pass offense, and Downs is the bona fide number 2 wide receiver there behind Michael Pittman, and actually out-targeted Pittman, I think, in this game, or at least had more receptions and yards than Michael Pittman. Here's a guy, Curtis Samuel is next up on the list in terms of just ads right now on Yahoo is the way we're sorting this. And you can look, he's had 3, anytime you're double digits, and we're talking about just trying to find a bye week filler off waivers, I'm thinking double-digit fantasy points means something. And Curtis Samuel is kind of like Deebo Samuel light, right? Like he's going to get a few rushing attempts every so often, but he's been involved as a receiver, and Sam Howell has been kind of a volume-based guy. In the last 2 games, they've been losing high-scoring affairs, and so that has caused the Commanders to have to continue throwing. And Curtis Samuel has been very productive. He's another guy that kind of like KJ Osborn. He's been around, and so we know the talent is not out of this world. But Samuel's also dealt with injuries in the past to where, like, I picked him up again on one of my rosters, and I probably will plug him into my flex this week after just dropping Sky Moore off the bridge. I guess it would make sense. We'll take a look at guys that are being dropped, and I'll tell you if it's time to cut ties with them too, because sometimes you do have to know who to add for the guys who to drop for the guys that you're adding off of waivers. But Curtis Samuel, definitely worth a look. Is he going to sustain these 10, 11, 18-point fantasy outings every week? Probably not. But there's some level of upside there. I think he's behind Josh Downs for me. Samuel versus Osborn. Probably should go Osborn because I think there's just going to be more guaranteed target volume the next 4 weeks. But Samuel's a guy that if he's out there, 18% rostered, I like him. Rashee Rice, 39% rostered, so not as likely to be on your waivers. But, somebody's got to emerge as a wide receiver for the Chiefs, and he's at least getting some target volume and he's seeing the field. So for me, I think there's more long-term upside in Rashee Rice over Osborn and maybe even over Curtis Samuel. That one's close. Rice's role is not there yet, but again, rookies tend to gain more opportunity as the season goes along. And so to me, that's the only wide receiver in the Chiefs room that I have really any interest in for fantasy to potentially emerge as something like Kadarius Toney. He'll have his moments, but not reliable. Sky Moore, you can drop. Don't let me tell you what to do, but I'll tell you what I did. I dropped him. And I have him stacked with Patrick Mahomes, too. So that tells you I really was fed up. I just don't think it's going to happen for Sky Moore. I don't think he's that guy. And I liked him coming out. It just I was wrong. So I'm cutting bait where I have him. But Rashee Rice, again, is a rookie, and you're already seeing him make some contributions as a rookie, which tells you that maybe they could gain more trust in him as time goes along. And behind Travis Kelce, the Chiefs just don't have any receivers that have been able to stand out in any meaningful way whatsoever. Jordan Addison is almost definitely not available. Yeah, we won't spend any time talking about him. But yeah, he's gonna be great while you see Justin Jefferson out. Josh Palmer, again, these are kind of the guys that are all rostered, so we're not really going to spend a lot of time on them. And then down to Brandon Powell. So yeah, from Brandon Powell up to, and again, if there's anybody that I don't cover on waivers and say, hey, is this guy worth an ad? Yeah, let me know. Let me know in the comments who you're interested in. You see on my roster here, I've got Smith and Jigba and Quentin Johnston. Those guys aren't low roster guys, and Jigba is up to 51%. Quentin Johnston down at 33%. Worthy stashes on your bench, but you may not even need to spend a waiver claim. And if you're in a FAAB league, just a buck or two, because if they're out there now, the people in your league just may not be prioritizing those players. But anytime I've got a rookie and I go, hey, he was highly drafted. I mean, we're talking first-round draft capital. To house him on my bench for a couple more weeks just to see, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I'm going to go Downs, Curtis Samuel. I'll double-check this list here. Downs is probably my favorite upside play, like long-term play. Osborn, if you need to start right now, for sure. Samuel, if you need to start right now, for sure. Rice would be interesting as well as a long-term play. But I think I would go Downs over Rice, and I would go Osborn over Samuel in terms of just kind of rating those out. And if you need somebody to start now, but you also are hoping to hit gold on a long-term option, I think Downs could be your guy over even Osborn, because if Jefferson returns, Osborn definitely is relegated to a complimentary role at best. Let's see if there's any tight ends worth picking up this week. Logan Thomas had the big reemergence on Thursday Night Football. 20 fantasy points. He had 11 targets, 9 for 77 and a touchdown. I don't know how often that's going to be the case, but if you're desperate, I mean, we know the tight end's crazy. I just wouldn't spend much FAAB on him. Same with Dalton Schultz, who had a touchdown and had a big game, honestly, for the Texans. But he plays week 6. It looks like New Orleans is tough against the tight end position. And then he goes on a bye, so I'm not spending big on Dalton Schultz, even though he does have a couple of good weeks in a row. He's worth picking up. He's worth a few FAAB dollars for sure if you're desperate at tight end. But otherwise, not too crazy. Cole Kmet, I think people are on to him. I traded him in this league, but I that was just because of a roster situation. I think Cole Kmet is a safe top 8 tight end the rest of the season. Like, I think he could definitely develop into that. But otherwise, at the tight end, yeah, there's not really anything else to talk about. Tyler Conklin, nah. He's always been a guy that's either going to be involved or not, but, he's not killing you for fantasy for the last 4 weeks. 10, 5, 9, 10. You could do worse, but I'm just not going to seek upside in the New York Jets offense at the tight end position. That's not really how I roll. And Noah Gray can probably be ignored, but he may be somebody that you want to pick up. If it's a FAAB league for $1, I don't think I'd waste a claim on him. But there is a chance that Kelce would miss Thursday Night Football because he had that ankle injury. He came back into Sunday's game against Minnesota, played well, was an integral part of the offense, but missed the estimated practice on Monday. We'll see what they say for Tuesday. But again, I mean, Noah Gray played the first week of the season without Kelce involved, and he didn't do anything. So he had the one big touchdown against the Jets in Week 4 on Sunday night. Otherwise, there's just not really a lot to go on. So even if Kelsey does miss, I'm not sure how eager you're going to be to head to the wire for Noah Gray. So nothing at tight end really trumps what we've talked about at running back or wide receiver in terms of my interest level. And then if you need quarterbacks, Sam Howell was somebody that I was intrigued by to begin the season. Coming in, draft season, I really liked him. And if the Commanders' defense keeps struggling, then maybe you're going to 388 passing yards and a couple of touchdowns. He can volume his way into being nice for fantasy, but I don't think you're really spending FAAB bucks on Sam Howell, Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew. In a super flex league, you're definitely going to want Gardner Minshew on board because anytime there's a starting quarterback, that becomes available in super flex, you just got to have that guy rostered. And Minshew, I think, will be very fine as a QB2 while he's in for the injured Anthony Richardson. So that's what that is. But otherwise, nothing really notable at the quarterback position far as I can tell this week. Dak Prescott stinks. Well, let's take a look at dropped players this week and see if there's anything we need to alert you to of hey, you can let this guy go because you have to drop somebody to pick somebody up on waivers, and maybe we can come up with some answers for you. Richardson, put him on IR if you have the slot. I would not drop Anthony Richardson. As long as I've got a deep-ish bench, 5 or more spots, I would keep Anthony Richardson on my bench even without an IR spot because I think when he comes back, he could be a league winner. I mean, the Colts were a low finisher last year, so I bet their playoff schedule is decent. Not really. Pittsburgh's a tough defense to be playing Week 15. But still, Anthony Richardson has shown real upside with his legs, so where he can score you 30 points each week in the playoffs, and you could be winning a championship because of him. So that's kind of all the thoughts I have. You're going to be playing the matchups mostly a quarterback if you're using any of those guys anyway. Michael Wilson was dropped. Yeah, that's fair. He went from having 26 fantasy points to 2. Yeah, 2 targets, just wasn't involved. I'm not really sure what happened here. He didn't see a target until under 3 minutes left in the game, and the Cardinals were down 14. So he's not going to be somebody you can rely upon. If you went after him and spent big on FAAB, I'm sorry. I did pick him up in a couple of leagues, but I ended up moving on after I made some trades before this week. So that is what that is. Romeo Doubs is a tough one, man. He hardly played, and Christian Watson appears to be back, and that's frustrating because Doubs was so involved before Watson. I mean, 18 fantasy points. He seemed invisible out there if he did see the field. And with Christian Watson back, that probably stays the same. And Romeo Doubs is going into a bye this week. So, yeah, I'd probably drop him. I probably would drop him. You could end up regretting it. He could always come back, and I know you go, man, he was productive for me when I had him, but he was probably on your bench too. It's just one of those things where if you're in a shallow league without a lot of bench spots, guys that go on by that aren't going to be mainstays in your lineup, it can be okay to drop them. And I would say that Doubs and both Jaden Reed too, they're sort of trending in the wrong direction. I dropped Reed in a league where I had him this week because he's on bye this week, and I would rather play the wire and try to come up with something. I would not drop Marvin Mims. I didn't see exactly what happened with him on Thursday. He just wasn't involved. He's going to continue to not be involved, but I do feel that there's a point for the Broncos that when they start trading people, they're talking about clearing house completely. If they trade Cortland Sutton, if they trade some of these other wide receivers, they will have no choice but to put Marvin Mims on the field, and I think he's a talented football player, so I wouldn't drop him. Jameson Williams getting dropped by a lot of teams. Had a small role, 2 for 3 on targets, and it was a stinker. Even without Amon-Ra St. Brown, he just wasn't involved. Even without Jahmyr Gibbs active, he wasn't involved. Be concerned because the Lions, man, they're hard to figure out. I wouldn't drop Jameson Williams, but I would try to trade him in redraft. I don't know if it's ever going to happen for him, and he's a guy that I drafted a lot of in Dynasty. I'm not saying I'm giving up on him yet, but I'm not seeking out new shares of him necessarily unless I can get him just for nothing from people panicking. But there's some reason to panic. I mean, I was kind of someone who spoke out against the anti-Jameson Williams narratives that were forming because it's well, he didn't do anything as a rookie. Well, he also had a torn ACL in the national championship game, which happens 8 months before the start of the season. So I didn't expect him to do much as a rookie. But it's year 2 now. The suspension is lifted. He's either going to sink or swim here over the next few weeks. His name is big enough that I don't think you drop him. But if you could get somebody with higher upside, like somehow if somebody saw Tank Dell have a mediocre week this week and you think I'll offer Jameson Williams for Tank Dell, I would take the Tank Dell side on that and redraft. I don't know about Dynasty, but Dell was well on his way to a decent game, and then he was in the concussion protocol. So that's why the second quarter he left. So Tank Dell might be a trade for. I love trading for guys with concussions. That sounds terrible. It doesn't make for a good soundbite, but it makes sense in the context of, like, do you want to trade for an injured player who's got a hamstring and you never know when he's going to return? Like, you're playing a tough gamble there. Concussions, we kind of know the norm for football players, especially wide receivers. He could miss a week after, week 5, leaving the game early, could miss week 6. When he comes back, though, it's not like, oh, is he going to be able to run as well on his bum knee? No, it wasn't a knee. It's a brain injury. And I don't mean to make light of that, but I feel like those are interesting candidates to trade for because somebody might just say, this guy's always banged up. They might look at his low production last week and think it was, he got injured. He's just no, it's very easy to have these things happen. And I still think Tank Dell has a high upside. So the people dropping him, I don't agree with that. I would trade Jameson Williams for Tank Dell, I think. Those could be famous last words, but that's kind of where I am. Wan'Dale Robinson. People not happy with Wan'Dale Robinson dropping him this week. Yeah, he's getting targets. The Giants stink, though. We know that it's going to be kind of tough. He's getting the slot snaps. I wouldn't drop him. He's hard to start. I'm waiting for him to have that 12-target, 10-catch game where then you can trade him and get the most value for him. This past week, I traded Kamara and Wan'Dale to get Tony Pollard. Probably was a bad week in retrospect to do that, considering Pollard was playing San Francisco, but I still won my matchup, so all's well that ends well. But I wouldn't necessarily be dropping Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't even know if I'd be dropping Tutu Atwell. I'd be trying to trade him probably. Had the touchdown, had a quiet game, but people might look at the fantasy points and think he'd be fine. There may come a week where you do have to drop Tutu, so if there's a guy you really want on waivers, you have my blessing. But I kind of think when a guy just now scored a touchdown, he's a good candidate to be packaged in a trade. I'm going to do a 3-for-2. I'm going to throw in Tutu because they know that, if something happens to Kupp again or Puka, that Tutu is going to be involved for the Rams. And the Rams passing offense does look pretty solid. But no, I don't know that I would want to drop him unless I just have to have somebody on waivers. But to me, there's not a bunch of must-have guys unless a Josh Downs was, for whatever reason, on waivers in your league. Then maybe you do it. Jeff Wilson. Yeah, you probably drop Tutu for the running backs if you had to. But usually there are guys that I'd rather drop. Let me know in the YouTube comments below your not only your start sits and your trade questions, but should I drop so-and-so for so-and-so? And I'll tell you point blank what I think you should do. And, you can take my advice with a grain of salt, but I will be honest and we can kind of talk through your situation. That's why we're here. Sky Moore, yep, I dropped him. I'm not telling you you have to, but I did. This is not something you're going to be able to put in your lineup 8, 1, and 3. It's just bad, man. I just don't think he's very good. I wish he was, but he doesn't look special on the field to me. So I dropped him. If Mahomes can't turn you into something, I just don't know that you're going to be something. So I let him go. Let me know, are you dropping Sky Moore this week? It's kind of a tough one. You probably drafted him with decent draft capital, maybe the 8th round or so, depending on your format. But to me, I just know I'm never going to put him in my lineup. I never want to be tempted to put him in my lineup again. And if he goes off, then, we'll deal with those consequences. But even with Mahomes in my lineup and it being a stack, I'm like, nope, I'm dropping him. Can't do it anymore. Those are the big ones at the wide receiver position. If I missed anybody, let me know at the YouTube comments below, and we'll let you know what you should be doing. People dropping Matt Breida. Yeah, that's probably right because Saquon's going to be back soon. And unfortunately, if you didn't already find a way to trade him, you're not going to off of the 3-point performance. So, yep, you can safely drop Breida. He's a guy that I would drop before waivers even clear, just so that I don't have to, conditionally drop him with every claim that I make. Just drop him and then order your waiver claims ahead of time. Same thing with the running back. If you picked up Patrick Taylor for Green Bay, Aaron Jones should be back by the next game, and he didn't really factor in last night anyway. You can drop him. Dalvin Cook's an interesting one. He's still rostered in 68% of leagues. Can anybody tell me why? Look at his fantasy totals. Yes, drop Dalvin Cook. You never should have drafted him. I don't have a single Dalvin Cook share. It never made sense to me that people were enticed by him. But hey, I'm not trying to rip you if you were, but it is okay to cut bait. Ignore the name. Try to trade him in a 2-for-1, package into the Breece Hall owner maybe. I don't know. But you don't need Dalvin Cook on your fantasy team. That ship has sailed. Breece Hall is the best running back there, and after his performance this week, you're gonna notice that because he's gonna get all the snap share. A.J. Dillon actually played pretty well, 20 for 76 and a touchdown, so you don't have to drop him, but he is going into a bye week, so if you decide to do it, I understand that because Aaron Jones will be back after another week on the bye, so. But A.J. Dillon is a good handcuff. Like if Jones, he's always going to have those little nagging injuries. He gets banged up for a few weeks at a time. A.J. Dillon is fine in certain matchups, so not necessarily someone you have to drop. Khalil Herbert, don't drop him. Wait for him to have IR eligibility. Gus Edwards, man, I never would have him. You could drop him. I know look at all this. He's getting all this, opportunity. I don't know. He's in a committee. Keaton Mitchell is coming back. I would try to trade him because I think he's got more cachet than that, but he's not somebody I need on my bench. I look for upside on my fantasy bench. Gus Edwards just doesn't have it. He's moving the wrong direction. Elijah Mitchell was out for the last game, but listen, a season could turn on a dime. When Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, Elijah Mitchell is a league winner, so I'm not ever going to tell you to drop a handcuff because we're just banking on injury or not at that point. So people are going to get fed up with their handcuffs. A handcuff that you can drop is Cam Akers. Yeah, he's just not that guy. So I'm okay with you dropping Cam Akers if you've got somebody you're looking for. Don't drop Keaton Mitchell. I don't know why 2,400 people are dropping him. It's time to add Keaton Mitchell, in my opinion. And don't drop Jaylen Warren, even though he's on bye this week. Looks like a couple thousand people have done that, but he's been solid, getting you 10 points a week in PPR. And tight end, you can probably drop anybody. You can drop them all. Let's see. Hunter Henry's getting dropped. That's fine. Luke Musgrave is on bye. He had 9 points. I would like to hold Musgrave through the bye if I could. Another thing you could do, though, is just drop him, do what you need to do, and then pick somebody from your bench to drop on Sunday night because he is on bye. You'll be able to pick him back up by Sunday night if nobody else does. But I think Musgrave over the season is going to be a nice weapon for Jordan Love. So I kind of want to keep him if I can find a spot to do so. Dalton Kincaid is probably a drop. That one's going to be hard to reckon with. Now he's in concussion protocol. He could be a drop, man. I've been disappointed with how the Bills have used him. Rookies, I hesitate to drop because maybe the other shoe drops and they end up being really productive. But if you're like, I just can't continue to look at Dalton Kincaid scoring 3 points a game on my bench. I would understand that. Try to trade him to the Josh Allen owner or something in a package, but you've got my blessing if you need to drop Dalton Kincaid. Tyler Higbee, I don't think I would drop. But here's what I would say about him. With Cooper Kupp back, it is tough because he's not going to find the target share that he had before. Kupp and Nacua are both going to be getting all the targets. And so Higbee's going to be someone you're not thrilled to start. Probably anticipating that and trading him a week ago would have been the play, but it's not like you paid a lot to get him. You probably picked him up off waivers anyway. Higbee, I would not trust as a weekly starter at tight end. I'm not 100% sure I would want to drop him, but at the same time, how many of us are really looking to roster two putrid tight ends just to swap between them each week? So I've talked myself into it. Knowing what we know about the Rams situation, if Puka and Cooper are healthy, Higbee's upside, which was based on volume, is now completely deteriorated. Pat Freiermuth, if he maintains out status, I would like to pick him up because he's on bye and you can stash him on IR during his bye week. Yahoo probably won't maintain out status for him. Sleeper probably will. What's his injury? He was out this past week. Yeah, he probably will maintain out status because he's got a hamstring injury and they said it was going to be 2 to 3 weeks. Yahoo is terribly inconsistent. I've yelled at him before. You guys don't handle out injuries correctly. But on the bye week, you might get lucky and him stay. Freiermuth is a good player, so I would stash him on IR if I had the chance to do so. So no, I wouldn't drop him. I would hope that he can just continue to squeeze into that IR spot. And that's really all I have. Let me know if there's a player that you would like to know about at the running back position, the wide receiver position, in terms of guys that should be added this week, guys that should be dropped this week. The top names here all kind of listed. We talked about Osborn, Demercado, Jeff Wilson Jr., Josh Downs, Roschon Johnson. I'm telling you, Roschon Johnson, to me, I'm going to go down with that ship. If you need someone for your starting lineup now, he's not the guy. He's concussed, and we don't know how much of a role he will take over. But with Khalil Herbert out for a little while, I think if we're talking about fantasy football 2 months from now, and Roschon Johnson's the RB1 undisputed for this team, wouldn't really surprise me, I think, from a talent standpoint. So that's why I like him. Josh Downs, similar, I think, is a rookie that could be on the rise. Jeff Wilson could step right into a lineup because of the injury to A-Chain. Demercado, same thing with the Connor injury. Let me know how much you're spending on FAAB for these guys, what your waiver priorities are, and make sure to drop back into the channel on Wednesday when we will begin our first video of Week 6, trying to figure out who we can freaking trade for. We're going to make some deals this week, so click the subscribe button, click like on this video, and drop your comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the channel. Peace.